everybody. This is Victoria Simmons with the Georgia Post and this week's edition of the Georgia Post Review. We're glad you joined us today. My co-host is Kristi Watkins.
Hello, everybody.
And our guest this week is Pastor Chuck Lewis.
Hello.
There's a new and exciting ministry coming to Crawford County, and he's going to tell us about himself as well as that ministry. Thank you for being here.
I am glad to be here. We're excited about what God's doing. I am Chuck Lewis. I'm a pastor. We actually serve at a church in Warner Robins, and the name of our church is Wellspring Church. We're actually starting a second campus out here. I've been at Wellspring for about 4 years. Before coming to Wellspring, we planted a church in South Atlanta. And prior to that, I worked with a Fortune 500 company for about 10 or 11 years before coming into ministry. And so my background is more in business and entrepreneurship. And so has been in ministry. That's sort of kind of been the trend is kind of starting new things as we started a new church. And so we are actually partnered up with Camp Grace. And so as we start out here, we'll actually be starting our campus out at Camp Grace. We hope to move into Roberta as soon as we can kind of get a core group of people built up, get some folks coming, and begin to get some property and those kind of things. But the reason that we're even starting a church out here really is because of Camp Grace. Those folks really have a heart to reach into the community. They want to be more involved in the community. And so 2 of my daughters serve out at Camp Grace, and so we have sort of a relationship. But then also, sort of the ministry of Camp Grace is to reach into urban neighborhoods and to reach kids who couldn't otherwise afford to come to a camp. And so in that ministry, where our church is in Warner Robins, we are partnered up with a Title I school there of lots of underprivileged kids. And so we sent 30 kids to camp this summer. Not kids from our church, but kids from the school. And so our heart really is to reach into community. And so I think one of the things that will set us apart from a lot of other churches is that we're more community focused than we are sort of inwardly focused about what we do in-house. We're more concerned about what happens outside the house. And so we're sort of a very missional minded organization. And so coupling up with Camp Grace and what they're doing, they have really expressed great interest in trying to reach into Roberta with their ministry into Crawford County. And so as we begin to talk, the vision of Wellspring Church is to be a church for all of Middle Georgia. And so as crazy as this sounds, our vision is to actually have 10 campuses scattered throughout small rural communities throughout throughout Middle Georgia. And so sort of a trend in church life today is to have 2,500 to 3,000 people come into one large church. We see it as sort of going into more rural communities and having local
Like
communities.
Smaller groups,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
And so all that comes out of sort of a central location in Warner Robins. And so what a lot of people don't think about is it costs a lot of money to do church. It takes lots of resources to do church. And so sort of our heart is to kind of centrally locate sort of the resource center and start churches out of that. Keeps costs down as you begin to create partnerships. You kind of get into the community, build relationships into the community. So that's sort of our goal. So that's kind of what got us here.
Tell us, how did you get into ministry?
So it's a crazy story. I grew up in church, and so some folks that are church attenders may take offense to this, but the reason I left church was because I grew up in church. The church didn't have a great effect on my life. I'll cry telling you this. But when I met Jesus, everything changed.
Exactly.
And so,
Because people think of the church as a building, and it's not.
It's not.
We are the church.
and I say that every week, that we're the church. We're it. And so really when I met Jesus through a guy who was actually a staff member at a church, and he began to disciple me. And I didn't know that he was discipling me. We were going to Denny's for breakfast. And he began to invest in me. And as he began to invest in me, I began to see that following Christ wasn't about attending church.
Right.
That following Christ was about following Christ.
Exactly.
And everything kind of changed for me. And so, top of my career. And God said, walk away and go into ministry. And so we did.
Well, you were obedient, and He
Yeah.
blesses that.
Yeah.
So.
So I have a history of just kind of doing some of that crazy outside the box. So that's kind of been our, and so I left the Fortune 500 company that I was with, and went into full-time ministry as a youth pastor. And so then after serving as a youth pastor, served as a executive pastor in a church, and then we started a church. And so now we're here.
So tell us about what you plan to do at a Camp Grace. What will it be? What it will consist of?
So we have begun meeting, doing some small group meetings here. There's been one family here in Crawford County that has come alongside us. It's from here in Crawford County, so we've been meeting in their house. Matter of fact, we met last night. And so next Sunday, August 12th, we're going to have our first preview service, and then we'll do another preview service on the 26th. And a preview service is just that. It's just come and see. And so that's what our folks are going to do. From Warner Robins will come and see. And so it's just kind of beginning that partnership. And then our plans are to start regular services on Sunday evenings, starting September 9th through December, and then move to a more Sunday morning experience starting in January is the plan.
I know that you had talked about when I had talked to you at the chamber, you were talking about what people you wanted, not to actually pull them from the other churches, but
Right.
Who did you want to pull?
Yeah, so it's really because of my background. What called me into ministry was we know that there are more unchurched people today than there are churched people, and so we've had this question come up: is why would we start a church here when there's lots of great churches here? And the sad reality is we need churches for churched people. But most of those churches, by the nature of who they are, aren't going to be able to attract unchurched people.
Right.
And so it takes something a little outside the box and a little different. And so what we want to do is actually come along beside the local churches that are here and partner with them in trying to reach all the folks here. And so our heart is to reach unchurched people, people that another term would be de-churched.
Mm-hmm.
We do live in the South. And so we've all been to church. That's what I tell. That's the reason a lot of us don't go anymore. But we want to be that church for the de-churched and the unchurched people. It's just a different. What we're doing is just a little different experience than the traditional church that we find in the South. So.
And a lot of people have been hurt by the church, and they can't get past that,
Right.
regardless of what happened.
Right. And so one of our key passages of Scripture that we kind of live by is Matthew 4:19, where Jesus says, "Come follow me, and I will make you fishers of men." And so if you start looking at the folks that Jesus said to come follow me, they were not your religious people. They weren't your
Right.
churched people. And then we also, for those of us that are churched, we look at a lot of the Pharisees, the Sadducees, as all of those are bad people. And they weren't bad people. They were good people. They really did love God. There was some bad in all that, but they were the religious people that knew God. And so Jesus said, but I came for those who don't know. I came for those who are sick. And so that's kind of our idea.
Well, they were kind of more into legalism than they were
Right.
the truth. And
Right. And that's why Jesus said, I came to fulfill the law, not do away with it, but there's more to it than just living in that.
Exactly,
And so-
and yeah, he doesn't always call the qualified, if you look at all of his disciples, the
That's
first
right.
12, you know.
That's right. But he equipped them as they went along.
Exactly, he
And-
qualified them, and yeah.
And so that's really part of our idea, is sort of what we would claim as our mission statement, sort of the overall arching goal of why we exist as a church, is to help people take one step closer to Christ. There's there's people who don't know Christ at all. There's some people who know Him, but that's kind of it. They don't really have a relationship. And then there's some people who know Him well, but it doesn't matter where you're at in that journey. God's constantly calling us to come closer.
Exactly, and mature.
And so that's the way we kind of see it, is that if we can help people take a step closer to Christ, because we know the presence of God's what will change lives. It's not, I think our worship services you'll find incredible, but we have figured this out, that it's not incredible worship services that lead people closer to Christ. It's personal relationships.
Exactly, that's what it's about, relationship.
And so, again, in that community and that missional sort of an idea, our church really is all about building community. And so that's why we want to go to where the people are. And I say this jokingly, but truthfully, the Great Commission says go to where the people are. And so
Exactly.
we said, instead of trying to create a Mecca center for people to come to, let's go to them.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
so,
And we're supposed to move our feet too, not just sit there,
right,
you know?
right. So
And
that's.
where are y'all located? The main,
Our main campus is located at 1101 Dunbar Road on the north side of Houston County. And so we're sort of in that north side district off of Houston Lake Road. And so if you guys want to visit us there, you can. You can visit us online as well at wellspringchurch.life, L-I-F-E. And so you can see what our worship experiences look like there, kind of get to know us and who we are. So.
and what time is your evening
Our,
services?
our evening services will meet out here at Camp Grace at 6 p.m. Services will last no longer than until 7:15, and we'll have more than childcare. We'll have a full service experience for our elementary kids, so they'll have their own worship experience. For us, middle schoolers and high schoolers, we bring into the worship experience with us. We don't really do a separate service for them. But that's intentional. We want to raise them up being part of the church, and so we feel like the services are dynamic and exciting enough that even teenagers would love it. And then we do have childcare for preschoolers as well, so, and nursery.
Is there a story behind the name Wellspring?
There is, and so we give these out. But Proverbs 4:23 says, "Above all else, guard your heart, for it is the wellspring of life." And so we know that what the enemy wants to get to is our heart. And our heart really, if you look at that in the Hebrew, when that was written, the heart really isn't the muscle that pumps blood. The heart is the thinking mechanism. It's actually our mind. And so if we guard that, above all else, guard that, for it is the wellspring of life. Everything that we do, the decisions that we make, everything comes out of our thinking mechanism, our heart, our soul. And so, but it says, guard it, for it is the wellspring of life. And so I'm a firm believer what we put in comes out.
Exactly.
And so we need to guard what we put in. It's the wellspring of life. And so our church is a very life-giving church. It's an exciting church. But what makes it exciting is what God's doing.
Exactly.
And so that's the thing that springs out. That's the thing that just continuously flows. And so that's our heart behind the name of Wellspring, is that you just have this continuous movement of God, Christ just moving in your life. So for those that may or may not know this, we just recently changed our name to Wellspring.
What was it?
And so, but prior it was Westside Baptist
Okay.
Church.
Okay.
And so before I came, we had a school, but there is a peanut football league of elementary boys, and we're actually this year, for the first time, we'll actually be playing Crawford County Rec League as one of our competitors in the, but it's all in the same league. And so, but we changed it to Wellspring One, as our vision is to grow into multiple counties and cities around Middle Georgia, instead of having a geographic name Wellspring, a geographic name of West Side, we wanted to have something that was non-geographic, but really descriptive of who we are. And Wellspring really is who we are, is that we want to be the spring that just continuously flows, but flows into our community, flows into where God's moving us. And so that's really who we are.
So what's your vision on how many campuses you would like to eventually have?
So we really don't have any towns so much targeted, as we know that God is calling us to expand just beyond a single campus, but to go out. Sort of the number that we've kind of put on that, which is arbitrary, but is 10. And so we haven't really sat down with a map and said these are the 10 towns that we want to be in. But as we've looked at kind of Middle Georgia, there's 10 distinct areas around that kind of make up Middle Georgia. Some of those are an hour's drive away. Some of those are 20 minutes drive away from our main campus. And so we've just kind of identified those and said, there are about 10 campuses is what we would like to do. We really don't have a numeric number on size of those. We'll let the community kind of dictate that. Again, I hate to say it this way, but we probably see more smaller churches spread out than really large campuses. But again, we'll let the community kind of dictate the size of those.
And there's nothing wrong with that.
But we do know that one of the things that we think will work well in having a central location is that, again, like I talked about earlier, resources just become really difficult in small churches. It's just that your pool is smaller. You just don't have as many people to pull from, and so your talent resources are smaller, your financial resources are smaller. All those things just become more challenging, not impossible. Anything's possible with Christ. But as the church expands, it kind of expands your resource pool. And so we're able to do more, accomplish more, be able to serve more people, being spread out, sort of our vision of what we want to do.
Where will you be at Camp Grace, and what building?
So it's what they call the corral, but it is their worship auditorium, their sanctuary, and so we'll be in there. It is a state-of-the-art facility. It is. If you haven't been to Camp Grace, I would encourage you to set up an appointment and go out and view that, or come out on a Sunday evening while we're there. But it is a phenomenal state-of-the-art facility, and so Dave Pridemore, the CEO, the pastor there, his vision really is God gave his best, so we ought to give our best as well. And so as they bring these kids out of these inner cities, what they get to experience is just top-notch, just an incredible space, just where they're at. So it's really, really good. I think one of the things that God is really using at Wellspring is sort of the process. I know that for a lot of us, as we think about church, we think about church as somewhere to attend on Sunday. And that's not an improper view, but there is more. And so you will see these little deals kind of laying everywhere, but sort of our catchphrase is come, connect, grow, and go. And so in the Crawford County setting, in the Houston County setting, we simply want to invite people to just come to Camp Grace. Just come at 6 o'clock on a Sunday evening and just come check it out. There's no strings attached. I know this may sound corny to some people, but we actually have a no hassle guarantee that we give people. And so we promise that if you come, we're not going to show up at your house on Tuesday evening while you're eating lasagna and let's barge in. Again, there's culturally there's nothing wrong with that, but sort of today, people just aren't expecting you to randomly show up at their house, and so we're not going to try and get your name and all your contact information and bombard you If you choose to give us that and say, hey, we want to be in contact and we want to follow up, we absolutely will follow up. But we want that to be on your terms, not ours. And so we just tell people, just come and see. What we have discovered is that we know that sitting here at the table, sitting in your living room at home, sitting at Hudson's Barbecue or anywhere, you can come to know Jesus anywhere. But most people come to know Jesus in a worship experience. And so all of our worship experiences are really designed to really introduce what God's doing and then give people an opportunity to come to know Christ. And so all of our services are designed that way. And so we say, just come and visit, come and see, and come and experience what God's doing. And so there's no hassle to that. But then we know that in order, once we come to know Christ, that really in order to live the life that God has for us, we've got to move from the lifestyle that we're in now into what He wants for us. And I just believe that the vehicle that God created to do that is the local church. And so we ask people, like, the next step would be to connect to the local body, and so make that your home. And I don't see this true for just Wellspring. I see this true for every church. And so as we connect to the local body, that should be the vehicle that helps us move from the sin that entangles us. That's where discipleship happens. That's where relationships are built, and it's more than just church attendance. This is where the intentionality comes. We have folks at our main campus that's been coming for 6 months, a year, and they're just attenders, and they come and they're still checking things out, and gosh, we more than welcome that. But at some point, we want to be able to make sure that we give you the opportunity to connect to the local body, because that's when you begin to grow. And really where we see growth happening the best is, like I was explaining earlier, a guy began to disciple me. I really didn't know it. We met at Denny's, and then we just began to have conversations, and he began to really explain to me, what Christ could do in my life. And so we began to do some book studies together. And so we see those as small groups today. The term that we use is a life group. These are people that we want you to do life with. James 5:16 tells us to confess our sins one to another. I think all of us probably feel pretty uncomfortable with that. But our sins isn't always, I went out and did something horrible. Right. It could be God's calling me to this and I don't feel comfortable. Those are the things that and so that confessing sin one to another isn't necessarily just saying all the bad things, but it's here's what my struggles are. It really is just doing life together.
Right, and He wants us unified, and we're supposed to carry each other's burdens too.
Right.
So.
And so when we do that in a life group or whatever setting, that may be a Sunday morning setting at our main campus, we still have what we would traditionally call Sunday school. We still do that at 9 o'clock. We also have groups that meet in homes. But the whole goal is to build those relationships and have meaningful conversation. And so if we can have meaningful conversation and meaningful relationships, and it helps us grow, I just believe that once we come to know Christ, once we get connected to the local body, we begin to serve that local body. We begin to confess sin. We begin to interact with one another, do life together. That's when we can really go. I have a love-hate relationship with the term evangelism. We are called to evangelize. We're called to go out. But it shouldn't be a forced component.
Right.
It should be God's done the incredible in my life, and I just want everybody to know. And so we just, as a result of being really connected to Christ and the local body and what God's doing, we can't help but go. It's just a lifestyle.
Yeah, and some people have to get to that point.
Right,
It's a process.
It is. It's a process, and we see that process laid out all through Scripture. Is come to know Christ, get connected to His local body, and then really begin to grow. And it's maturity. And as we mature, we begin to go out and do what God's called us to do.
And meeting with a local church like that, it does help you to mature because it helps you to grow because if they can help you with areas you're struggling, and it's just great.
That is the purpose of a local church. And so if we can help people get connected to another local church that's here in Crawford County or get connected to Wellspring that we're starting, our goal is to see people come to know Christ and get connected so they can grow and become what God's called them to be.
Do you, by chance, are you on the internet so they could?
We are. Again, you can go to wellspringchurch.life. And we do live services on there, so you can join us on live. You can also find us on Facebook at Wellspring Church GA, Wellspring Church Georgia, and so you can join us on our Facebook live. On our Facebook page. Right now, we're in the middle of 21 days of prayer, and so Monday through Friday at 6 a.m. I'm on Facebook Live. And we do a prayer and devotion together, and so you can download a 21-day prayer devotion guide that we've written. And then on Saturdays we have a corporate prayer at church, and then of course Sundays we gather together. But then you can also find me on Instagram at Pastor Chuck Lewis, and so all that's on there as well.
Unfortunately, these are the things that we have to use
It
this
is.
day and time.
It is.
Whether we
So,
like it or not.
I have 4 children, and so I have learned to embrace social media. If I want to keep up with them, that's how I can kind of keep up with them.
Yeah, well, we have
So.
to for our jobs too, and I have kind of a love-hate relationship with it.
Yep.
It can be good, but it can be bad, so.
Yeah, so we just about everything that we do, event-wise, church-wise, as we launch the Roberta campus, you'll be able to track and follow all that on our social media sites.
Great.
So.
And tell us again, remind us when the first service at Camp Grace.
So our first service is August 12th on Sunday evening at 6 p.m. Out at Camp Grace off of Walker Chapel Road. And then our second service, we'll skip a week, it'll be August 26th. And so both of those will just be preview services, just come and see. And then on September 9th is when we will begin regular services on Sunday evening at 6 p.m.
Okay, well, great. Anything else we need to know before we wrap this up?
So you should be getting a mailer in the mail. Should be coming out this week. This could change your life forever. And so on the back, it just kind of tells you a little bit about our church and who we are, and that we're coming this fall. And so when you get this, unlike a lot of our other junk mail, don't throw it in the trash. Just read it real quick.
Did you just mail this to Crawford County, or?
It is. It's just to Roberta in Crawford County.
Okay, well, great. Well, thank you. We appreciate Pastor Chuck Lewis being here today and telling us about this new ministry that God is in the middle of. And as this says, it will change your life. A relationship with Christ will change your
Absolutely.
life. So thank you for being here.
Thank you so
And we'll
much.
be praying for this new ministry here and for everyone who attends, but especially for you.
Thank you. Yeah, I probably need it the most. Thank you.
Well, we thank you. That's been our edition of the Georgia Post Review this week, and we'll see you next week. 3, 2, 1.